My reading this morning are words of wisdom from two brilliant minds, and together they provide us with some powerful insights. Eckhart Tolle writes about ego. Thinking, or more precisely, identification with thinking, gives rise to and maintains the ego, which in our Western society in particular is out of control. It believes it is real and tries hard to maintain its supremacy. Negative states of mind such as anger, resentment, fear, envy, and jealousy are products of the ego. Albert Einstein shares similar ideas, but he expands on them. A human being is a part of a whole, called by us the universe, a part limited in time and space. He experiences himself, his thoughts and feelings, as something separated from the rest, a kind of optical delusion of his consciousness. This delusion is a kind of prison for us, restricting us to our personal desires and to affection for a few persons nearest us. Our task must be to free ourselves from this prison by widening our circles of compassion to embrace all living creatures and the whole of nature and its beauty. My prayer this morning is from the Daily Word. It's a devotional that I use every day. And this particular writing was from June the 3rd of this past few weeks. Please center yourself in whatever way that works for you as we enter into a time of prayer and meditation. Infinite Spirit, ground of all being, to that which connects us with the universe and to each other. I marvel at people who seem unflappable even under the most agitating circumstances. They meet people and situations with steadiness and serenity, being a calm bearing that helps diffuse tension. I can learn something important from these special people. They are not calm because they never encounter troubling situations. They are calm despite the troubling situations. I want to claim their calmness as my own. I begin by realizing no matter what is happening in my life, I can choose my reaction. I use the affirmation, I am calm, I am at peace. I repeat these words aloud or silently until they fill my mind and I feel calmness permeate my soul. I no longer seek peace because I am peace. Amen and namaste. Imagine, if you will, some dystopian future where it's dangerous to be outside on your own. At almost any time, a missile with the ability to kill you could be aimed right at you. But in most cases, all you have to do to survive is to be vigilant and aware at all times, looking for the missiles in order to simply avoid them by moving out of their way. But if you allow yourself to get distracted in any way, a missile could easily hit and kill you. So my question to you is this: would you be present in every moment in this world, or would you allow yourself to be distracted? This world I'm describing isn't a dystopian future. It's right now, whenever we get in our cars and go somewhere. When we do, we're all driving around in a kind of missile, one that's aimed at other people. And yet, we let ourselves get distracted with music or cell phones or the crazy people on talk radio, and we lose focus on the present moment. And sometimes, when we aren't truly present in the moment, we are hit by another car, or we hit another car. And as I was driving down the seawall this morning, twice, once to breakfast and once to here, all I kept thinking about was, I hope I don't get distracted by the beautiful water and the people and the new construction and make my sermon come to life. So I was like, oh no, we didn't get hit. So being present in the moment is a key to being a good driver. The secret to driving, and also to life, is exactly what we were taught in school. Sit down, shut up, and pay attention. Fortunately, with the vast majority of our lives, the consequences aren't as dire as when we aren't paying attention to the other cars on the road. But we still need to pay attention because we don't know what we're missing along the road of life when we're focused on all the distractions that we really enjoy. For instance, when we're focused on our love of food, we might not realize how much weight we're gaining and the harmful effects it's having on our bodies. Or when we transition from our very active young lives to more sedentary older lives, we might not notice our loss of strength or flexibility. Or when we're so engrossed in the music we love or the movie we're watching, we might forget about the food boiling over on the stove, or we fail to notice the pain in the eyes of someone we love who might be sitting right next to us. All of these things happen when we stop paying attention to our own lives and the lives of those we care about. We must pay attention so that we can actively choose to act according to what we know to be right and good, versus satisfying our ego, which is seldom good for anyone. And I'll offer a simple test about being present, which I all too often fail. When you are having personal interactions with someone you love or a close friend, such as having a conversation, are you listening to understand them, or are you listening to respond? Often when we are listening to respond, we are anticipating the future and waiting for a time when we can satisfy our egos. That is, talk about ourselves or one-up whatever experience we just heard from our friend or loved one. This is in contrast to when we are listening to understand. That is, to truly hear and take in what the other person is attempting to share with us. Then our attention is focused on them and their needs, and we are actively in the present moment, without a compulsion to talk about ourselves and satisfy our fragile egos. So paying attention is crucial for our overall well-being, and luckily for us, there are many traditions and practices to help us focus on what's important to each of us individually. And the living tradition we claim as you use reminds us specifically of the wisdom from the world's religions which inspire us in our ethical and spiritual lives. So with that in mind, I want to share some ideas and practices from 3 wisdom traditions, and each has practices for being in the moment, being truly present, or paying attention. Practice is actually a key word here, because paying attention requires that we actually practice paying attention. When we practice something, it becomes second nature when we truly need to benefit from the thing we've been practicing. Even with my first example, driving, before you become a good driver, you must practice. That's often done in empty parking lots or on mostly deserted streets, or even in driving schools with trained instructors guiding us on our way. Eventually, we become proficient enough to drive all by ourselves on busy streets. But practice is also required if you want to be a good golfer, pianist, or even a card player. Practice is key to mastering any skill and then being able to use that skill effectively in life when it is needed. And mastering the art of being present is no different. The first tradition I want to consider is Christianity. And in my opinion, as you use, we often dismiss or ignore what Christianity has to offer, even when it's potentially useful and valuable. The practice Christians originally used in order to pay attention was prayer. In recent decades, prayer for many has taken on traits early Christians would hardly recognize, and those traits often go against the actual teachings of Jesus. In Matthew, Jesus said, "And when you pray, do not be like the hypocrites, for they love to pray standing in the synagogues and on the street corners to be seen by others. But when you pray, go into your room, close the door, and pray." Yes, Jesus said, go, be alone, and pray all by yourself. Prayer for Christians was a way of paying attention to what's important, and actual reminders, often uttered in prayers, reinforced what was important and their potential benefits. One very common prayer for many Christians is called the Lord's Prayer. Besides praising God, the Lord's Prayer is replete with reminders of what should be important in a person's life. This includes giving thanks for nourishment, forgiving both ourselves and others for the mistakes we all make, and for asking wisdom to resist temptation, which, let's face it, is always present. The final plea in the Lord's Prayer is the recognition that we are all often the unwilling victims of the harmful actions of others. And it's a request for the strength to survive those harmful actions. We all know bad stuff is going to happen, and we simply want to have the strength and the fortitude to get through those times. Nothing has changed in over 2,000 years since Jesus first shared the Lord's Prayer with his followers. And of course, the Christian practice of prayer was highly influenced by the Hebrew tradition that preceded it. Judaism had a strong emphasis on the practice of prayer, and Judaism called its followers to specifically listen for the still, small voice, which we hear when we block out all the distractions and actually pay attention. You might call the still, small voice your gut feeling or your conscience. But whatever it is, if we'll stop and push aside all the distractions, we give that voice an opportunity to be heard. Christian prayers evolved over time, and one of the most meaningful prayers, at least to me, reminds us to pay attention to our own reactions to what we experience and witness in life all around us. In my opinion, those who practice this particular prayer are getting at the heart of true Christianity and the original purpose of prayer. This prayer is known as a Franciscan benediction, and it goes like this: May God bless you with discomfort at easy answers, half-truths, and superficial relationships, so that you may live deep within your heart. May God bless you with anger at injustice, oppression, and the exploitation of people, so that you may work for justice, freedom, and peace. May God bless you with tears to shed for those who suffer pain, rejection, hunger, and war, so that you may reach out your hand to comfort them and turn their pain into joy. And may God bless you with enough foolishness to believe that you can make a difference in the world, so that you can do what others claim cannot be done, to bring justice and kindness to all our children and to the poor. Yes, prayer can be a powerful tool in our practice of paying attention, if you'll let it. And that practice better prepares us to be the people in life our values claim that we are. And paying attention helps us focus on the world around us, and not just our egos, which are never satisfied. The second tradition I'm going to talk about is one I've only become familiar with in the last few years. And that tradition is Stoicism. It was popular from around 300 BC to 200 AD, and it was practiced in both Greece and Rome. A common practice within Stoicism was to journal and reflect over and over again on your own personal beliefs, reinforced by teachers or mentors who were also often Stoics. The book, The Art of Living, by former slave Epictetus, who lived from 50 to 135 AD, is a book read today by many people. Just a few decades after his death, Epictetus inspired the most famous of all Stoics, Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor. Aurelius is considered the last of the 5 good emperors of the Roman Empire. Aurelius kept personal journals and returned to the same themes over and over again as he constantly tried and actually worried about being a good and just ruler. His journals, which he never intended to be made public, were first published in 1559. There have been well over a dozen translations since the original publication. Aurelius's journals focused on what are considered the 4 virtues: wisdom, courage, moderation, and justice. And his writings touched on each of these repeatedly. Down through the centuries, many people have been inspired by his journals, which are currently published under the title Meditations. Some of those people include Vietnam Prisoner of War and Medal of Honor recipient James Stockdale, author of the Harry Potter books, J.K. Rowling, business legends Warren Buffett and Bill Gates, and several of our own presidents, including Bill Clinton and George Washington. Author Ryan Holiday says that Washington saw a lot go wrong. He lost his father at age 11, and throughout the 9-year Revolutionary War, he was in difficult financial troubles, and he constantly feared that his beloved Mount Vernon would be destroyed. And then, after the Revolutionary War, as the U.S. government floundered, he was drawn into the crush of politics and eventually the presidency, where he was subjected to criticism in the press, difficult subordinates, and the demands of voters. Can you imagine? Much earlier, when Washington was only 26 years old, he watched a play about the Stoics, where he heard a phrase that he would turn into his lifelong mantra. He would repeat it to himself in many stressful and challenging situations, whether it was a setback on the battlefield or the infighting between members of his cabinet. And it goes like this: in the calm light of a mild philosophy. It was in the calm and mild light that Washington approached the news that one of his generals was slandering him behind his back. It was in the calm and mild light that Washington dealt with the saddening realization that he and his wife could not have children. It was in the calm and mild light that Washington approached a mob-like meeting of his officers who threatened mutiny against the new American government, slowly, masterfully talking them back from treason. In June of 1797, Washington found himself writing this reminder out in 3 separate letters, trying to stop himself from rushing to judgment or losing control of his motions, and instead looking at the situation with the temperament befitting the father of a country. Yes, George Washington put his Stoic mantra to use constantly in many stressful situations, and it helped him become the great president history remembers. A couple of my favorite mantras from the book Meditations are: when you are distressed by an external thing, it's not the thing itself that troubles you, but only your judgment of it. And you can wipe that out at a moment's notice. Similarly, you shouldn't give circumstances the power to rouse your anger, for those circumstances don't care at all. Why bother getting mad at causes and forces far bigger than us? Why do we take these things personally? After all, external events are not sentient beings. They cannot respond to our shouts and cries, and that's what Marcus was reminding himself here. Circumstances are incapable of considering or caring for our feelings, our anxiety, or our excitement. Another mantra is from the famous Stoic Seneca, and it's the following: to bear trials with a calm mind robs misfortune of its strength and its burden. And that bears repeating. To bear trials with a calm mind robs misfortune of both its strength and its burden. And once again, author Ryan Holiday in his writings on Stoicism says, the pause is everything. The pause before jumping to a conclusion, prejudging, assuming the worst, rushing to solve your children's problems for them, forcing a problem into some kind of box, assigning blame, taking offense, turning away in fear. And all of these pauses require that we actively choose to be present and truly live in the moment with the experience going on. This practice is consistent with one of the strongest tenets of the early Stoics, something called amor fati. Amor fati is the practice of accepting and embracing everything that has happened, is happening, and is yet to happen. It roughly translates as the love of fate. You cannot control what happens to you in life, but you can always control what you will do about what happens to you. And what's happening to us And how we choose to respond to whatever that may be requires that we pay attention all the time. And I'll say it again. Paying attention helps us to focus on the world around us and not just our egos, which will never be satisfied. The final practice I want to talk about is truly a practice and not a religion, as many often claim. One of its most famous practitioners during the 20th century said the following: "There is a misconception that Buddhism is a religion and that you worship Buddha. Buddhism is a practice like yoga. You can be a Christian and practice Buddhism. I met a Catholic priest who lives in a Buddhist monastery in France. He told me that Buddhism makes him a better Christian." And that was a quote from Buddhist monk Thich Nhat Hanh. For many practicing Buddhists, paying attention is one of the central practices each individual strives for through another practice, the practice of meditation. The goal of meditation isn't to control your thoughts. It's to stop letting your thoughts control you. And don't our thoughts often control us? Don't we worry sometimes uncontrollably? Aren't we often excessively angry or frustrated? Don't we obsess over things we have absolutely no control over? Buddhist teacher Pema Chodron goes further, writing, "Sitting meditation gives us a way to move closer to our thoughts and emotions and to get into touch with our bodies. It's a method of cultivating unconditional friendliness towards ourselves and for parting the curtain of indifference that distances us from the suffering of others. It is our vehicle for learning to be a truly loving person. We regard disappointment, embarrassment, irritation, jealousy, and fear as moments that show us where we're holding back, how we're shutting down. Such uncomfortable feelings are messages that tell us to perk up and lean into a situation when we'd rather cave in and back away. Sticking with uncertainty is how we learn to relax in the midst of chaos, how we learn to be cool when the ground beneath us suddenly disappears. We can bring ourselves back to the spiritual path countless times every day simply by exercising our willingness to rest in the uncertainty of the present moment over and over again." That present moment that Pema is writing about is the act of paying attention over and over again. And if you practice Buddhism, it's something you will practice forever. And I'll mention it one last time. Paying attention helps us to focus on the world around us and not just our egos, which are never satisfied. So, if you believe, as I believe, that paying attention is important, I hope you'll consider using one of the practices I've just mentioned in your own life and see if it works for you. Or better yet, pay attention to your own life and what's already working for you. And then consciously and intentionally expand on whatever practice that might be. And pay better attention to the here and now, the only here and now you will ever have. Amen and namaste.